Just a quick overview of who we are in terms of Icotec, and then we'll go on to the main topic. We're a Microsoft implementation partner. We are based in Cardiff in South Wales. Obviously, due to the current situation, everyone's working from home, and we can deliver those projects and implementations from remote locations. So our main support partner areas are the SharePoint, Power BI, and Project Online. But we also do a lot within the Power Platforms as well, which we've got webinars on. Okay. So Icotec partners, three main partners that we currently deal with: the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategies, Intellectual Property Office, and Office of National Statistics. All of those have got either consultancy, Project Online, or Power BI implementation going forward, and in the middle of those implementations as well. So the tools are being used, but there's more development being asked from us to deliver. Okay, so that's the quick Icotec intro. So without further ado, for the main topic, it's over to you, Richard.
Great. Okay, a little bit about me and my background. So I'm currently doing some work with the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, working with the digital team around portfolio and program management and tools. So we are putting in place some applications and software that helps with the return to workplace. All the effort that's going on, I'm sure everybody is very aware of the challenges that are going ahead right now. My background is primarily around project programs, transformation, and PMO. So I've spent time at large private companies, Imperial Brands, Foreign Commonwealth Office, another stint at Bays previously when it was DEC, and Skills Funding Agency is listed on here. But it's primarily in the projects and program space and delivery thereof. Right. So what is project failure? So you need to know what project failure is and sort of understand it a bit more before you can work out how you might be able to limit it or stop it. So a couple of very interesting guys, Bent and Alex, who are listed at the bottom here, they put together a paper about why do projects fail, and I'll come back to some of Alex's work as we go through this. So looking at research, there's a number of statistics and lots of data points out there that you can look at, but across industries and geographies, basic targets of delivering a project. 9 out of 10 transport projects fail. So Transport for London over here and DFT, they've got lots of challenges on their hands. Energy projects, the stats tell us 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10 dams, 10 out of 10 Olympics, a big complex project. Maybe understandable that there's some challenges with it, but some very fixed timescales. So there's evidence that says you don't meet your cost targets, it's constant, and there hasn't been an improvement for, well, a century. So why is that the case? We know how to deliver projects. How are we still failing? Let's move to the next one. A couple of closer to home examples. NHS. So as you see down the right-hand side, a couple of different newspaper articles. It happens when it happens. It can be uncomfortable. It can draw a lot of interest, and it's very difficult to deal with. And for the project, there's a lot more work involved when it starts going wrong, and especially if you get this kind of coverage and press attention. So one of the biggest ones, most famous ones, lots of people will know about, National Programme for IT, MP-FIT, as some people might know it. MP-FIT was a large, ambitious project, 40,000 GPs, 300 plus hospitals. It ended up costing an inordinate amount of money and far exceeding the expectations of what that level of project was going to need in terms of funding. 7 years, and the actual delivery of that project was very, very limited. So it was going to be 169 trusts. They'd got to 13, arguably less in terms of functionality. It also caused lots of problems in terms of data, patient records, which was the core of the project. Why it existed was to secure and give greater access to. It lost some. which clearly any project does not want to have that. Part of that was driven by the last bullet here that talks to it was a very big and ambitious project. So maybe that contributed to the failure. Bringing it more into the public sector and more recently, so an example of a project failure, the Dyson electric car. So why would I say it's a failure? Because he stood there and he's got the car with him. The intent of the project was to achieve mass production of a new electric vehicle. Now, what they found when they pulled the drains up on this project was that actually they would have known from the start that market-wise, they weren't going to have a market for this vehicle. This, as a project failure, cost about 500 million, small beer compared to the first one we talked about. And James was probably able to reach into his pocket and pull that out. But again, not all projects are in that position, and it is again a failure. Some of you may recognize the vehicle below, probably those with the grey hair like me. That's a Sinclair C5. So going back in time, another electric vehicle, and again another project failure. So there is evidence for this the further back you go, and in different industries and organizations. So some stats, looking at a couple of the sources here. So PMI runs a report, the pulse of the project world. Average 11.4% of investment is wasted due to poor project performance. So slightly down on 12% in 2019. So this is current figures. But again, that's 1 in 10. That's a lot of money. Organizations that undervalue project management as a strategic competency for driving change report an average 67% more of their projects failing outright. Now, it doesn't give you the exact number, but it's clearly quite a big percentage that is impacted by undervaluing project management. So there's a competency there leaning towards why projects are failing. Projects go over budget 27% of their intended cost, and that's from Harvard. On average, 1 in 6, 16% projects saw a budget overrun of 200%. So these are pretty big failures on what they thought the projects were going to deliver. A couple of bits here from PwC. 55% of project managers cited budget overrun as a reason for project failure. Now, whether that's a reason or there are other things, but it's being cited by project managers, people running these projects that are failing. So we've got to take it as valid information. And the bottom one, 17% of IT projects go so badly, they threaten the existence of the company. And that's sourced from McKinsey and University of Oxford, which I'll come back to in here because they've got some really good data sets to work with. Stats, so project budget statistics, specifically around numbers. 27% over their intended cost. The 200% we've already talked about. I think these are similar to what we saw previously, so I'll just skip through these quite quickly. Now, I talked about the Oxford data set. This is a slide from a talk given by Alex. The details are in the slide deck. Now, I went to a meetup. It was called the Data and Projects Analytics meetup in London, and this was it is a continuing community of about 4,000, and the idea is to bring data analysts and project managers together into a community. The idea of having data and project people working together to overcome the problem of the exhaust plume from projects being all the data that is captured. Now, Alex and Bent and through the University of Oxford, they have analyzed 12,000 projects across industries, across sectors, and over time. And through the data that they've got on these 12,000 projects, they found that of all those projects, 47.5% are on budget or better. When you add to that time, then that statistic comes down to 7.8% of 12,000 projects are on budget, on time, or better. When you layer on top as well whether those projects achieved their benefits of what they were meant to deliver, we're down to 0.5%. Now, I was sat in that presentation and I remember it. And that 0.5% statistic for me as a project delivery professional I was quite shocked by it, but I was really interested in why, how, 0.5%. That's a minuscule number, so there must be something more to this. So I did a bit more research and looked into it. Now, again, Alex Budzier and Bent, they put together there is a book you can read related to this, the Oxford Handbook of Mega Project Management, and they came up with the Iron Law of projects. In particular, this is talking mega projects. The Iron Law of mega projects: over budget, over time, under benefits, over and over again. And that's, again, based on the data set that they had. They can see this is a recurring theme. So much so that they've called it the Iron Law. Now, planning does play a part in project failure. Most research focuses on the execution of projects and how they progress. Overruns are not always a failure of execution, but they are always a failure of planning. And again, it's an area where little has been done to improve the front end for a very long time. So why do we need to do projects differently? Well, in the UK, 1 in 3 hours I worked on projects. Again, Alex and Ben talk here of the 0.5%, and productivity in the two project heaviest sectors, construction and professional services, has not improved in the last 20 years. Now, obviously with what's happened in the last 6 months, it would be really interesting to see what those productivity numbers say. But this is what's being presented to us, and this gives us a really compelling reason as to why we need to do something different and understand why project failure is such a problem and so consistent. So what are the reasons why? So the idea is that actually, here's the project manager. He has asked for a budget. He's ended up with half the budget, and yet the project is going ahead and continuing. Now, it's quite funny as a cartoon. It's not funny in a project when it happens and you ask for a budget and you get half of it. Now, a number of you may be aware in the public sector as well, and working through business cases, the 5 business cases, the OBC, the full business case. The number of times the information that's available at the time of setting out the program or project in the outline business case or at the early days is very limited, and you actually ask for the money thinking full well you have everything you need to deliver this project, but you don't know what you don't know. And so actually this cartoon of you're asking for half the money to deliver the project and you start, a number of times in some of these big programs, that's exactly what happens at the outline business case stage, but the project and program are not even aware of it yet. So they've set up for failure before they've started. In terms of the reasons, so in the initiation and planning phases of projects, some of the key reasons are having an unclear business case. A number of times I've seen business cases that start off looking somewhat vague. They have a degree of information, but they don't know the full picture. And so they've got an unclear business case. Insufficient approval process. So either insufficient in terms of don't know what the approval process is and so get tripped up by it further down the road, or there just isn't enough approval of the right areas. So things like the technical design authority taking a view on some of the solutions that are going to be coming forwards in the programs doesn't always happen. Architectural input, might be legal input, commercial input often causes some problems where you're trying to contract with organizations you haven't had enough input in. So the approvals process can be a problem. Poor definition of project scope and objectives. I know I've been on projects where that's been the case. I'm sure you could share some of that experience as well. So a cause of failure, not having clear scope and objectives, can really run you into the ground. Poor estimating of time and money. Estimation is a key problem, both on resources and on the funding. So having a range of estimates that you are measuring and applying judgment to can help with that. Lack of business ownership and accountability. A number of times not having the seniors available when you need them, or having day jobs to do that don't really revolve around the project work that you're doing. That lack of business ownership and accountability can really cause a big problem. Incomplete stakeholder buy-in and engagement. Again, without the right people involved and the right input, you're not going to know what you don't know. So you need that expertise to feed into it. Insufficient and over-optimistic planning. Many a time you see people who come up with dates, but there isn't enough science behind the dates, or they haven't had the right input. So it is very optimistic. Right to left. Public sector, often with government, you can find yourself given a date that you have to deliver to, and then you plan back from that date because it's not going to move. It might be a ministerial pledge that's come out, and suddenly the program needs to pull all the cylinders together and fire on all of them to get to a date that maybe wasn't planned out from the start. And a lack of thoroughness and diligence in the project startup phases. There is oftentimes a rush to get everything moving, but taking a bit of time up front and that crucial element can get it set up to avoid failure, or at least do your best to make sure you get away with it. Technical and resources, so another area of project failures. Lack of business involvement resulting in expectation issues. So this can be around scope, but it can also be around the requirements. So you might not have all the relevant parts of the business involved, and you go ahead with the program building something that actually doesn't meet everybody's needs. Not that we need to meet everybody's needs, but the right people's needs. Product owner, unclear or consistently unavailable. Now, this is a crucial part where the project team have not necessarily got the same knowledge as the business themselves. So the product owner as a role needs to be fully engaged and providing the input as it's needed. Scope creep. Oftentimes you start off with a good idea and it just gets bigger and bigger. Making sure managing that and having change control around it so that the resources and the timescales keep up with any changes to scope, not trying to deliver everything and more, but within the same timescales and money. Poor or no requirements definition, incomplete or changing requirements. I have seen projects where their requirements log is somewhat limited, or where they have not got requirements set in any way that can be delivered against, or you can't measure against. So you don't know what the definition of done is. Did we meet that requirement? Wrong or inappropriate technology choices. There is often a push for the new shiny thing, future-proofing, etc. What comes with that is oftentimes risk. It's a new untested solution, or inappropriate technology choices can just be we've picked this technology because this is the one we have skills in. It's not right for the business. It's not right exactly for the requirement, but that's the one we'll go with. I'm sure none of you have ever been in that position. Unfamiliar or changing technologies, lack of required technical skills, integration problems. Oftentimes the integration can be a bit of a killer. You think it's straightforward to connect things up, but there can be many unforeseen problems just trying to get the wiring right. So beware of that. Testing is always the thing that gets squeezed. Whether you're doing agile or whether you've gone down a waterfall route, make sure that there is plenty of testing, because it's testing that shows you what's wrong, and it's the what's wrong things that will finish you off. Make sure you do it before go live, because after it's a lot. Lack of QA. So having deliverables is a good thing. Knowing what the key deliverables are is even better, and having some quality assurance around whether they're the right deliverables and whether they've been met is going to help you with any kind of failure. So have you delivered the things you said you would? And bug fixing phase at the end of the project. Lots of times you get, oh well, we just fixed that in the next sprint, or in the next phase. Oh, we'll resolve that in testing. Before you know it, you get to the end of the project and you've got a whole nother project still there waiting for you by the time you get there. So keeping a close eye on bug fixing as you're going is very important. So that's in the technical and resources space. Some areas where project failure can be set up. You can see the symptoms coming through. If we move to the next slide, stakeholder management. So insufficient attention to stakeholders and their needs. Stakeholder management is one of those nebulous things that people put a matrix together or a spreadsheet and say, there you go, we've done it. But it's actually a forever thing that you constantly need to keep on top of through the project. keep talking, keep them close, keep reviewing that they have the same expectations as what you're doing. Some things can change, and it's all right for them to change, but they've got to be managed and transparent so people know. Incomplete stakeholder buy-in at initiation. So it is very important that everybody knows where you're going when you set off on the journey. Trying to catch them up while you're in the middle of delivering a project is very, very difficult. So spend the time up front to ensure that that initiation, everybody is clear, have asked all the questions, overdo it if you can. Lack of senior management executive support. Project sponsors not 100% committed, lack understanding of the project, and not actively involved. Now, you find this in projects, and IPA, the Infrastructure Projects Authority, they will also advise that having that executive level buy-in, PMI do the same. That executive level buy-in for projects makes a vast difference, and that is because they can unlock problems that the projects can't, simply because of the relationships and the seniority authority that they have and who they know across the organizations. So that's quite a key one from my side. Inadequate visibility of project status and priority. Denial adopted in preference to hard truths communicated. Oftentimes in projects, you kind of close your eyes a little bit to that problem, this problem, we'll fix that later, or it'll go away. Or you don't want to have those difficult conversations because they're difficult. But it's always better to bite that bullet the sooner you can, because it only gets bigger and worse. People not dedicated to the project, trying to balance too many different priorities. Now, this can be team members, but it can also be the seniors of the project wearing multiple hats and maybe not prioritizing as much input into the project as they need to. And they only find out when it's too late. So the failure is already set in. Innovation, project team members lack experience and do not have the required skills. A recent one for me around new technology and cloud in particular, getting a hold of certain skills, and with our particular case, it was certain skills in certain nationalities, was incredibly difficult. And in certain technologies, there's very, very limited skills available. And if you're at the cusp of it coming out, then everybody's clamoring for some of those skills. So need to be very careful if you are going down the innovation route, and resourcing and skill sets is an important one. Authority or decision-making ability, the amount of delay that can cause to a project, the impact is huge. So making sure that you've got the right decision-making engine around your project with the right accountabilities and the people aware of it, that is a big part of your planning. And poor collaboration, communication, teamwork. I'm sure we can all share that one. Project management, reasons for failure, no project management best practices. That's related to skills, but there's so many best practices out there at the moment that it can be quite difficult to know which one you should be going for. There is a new Gov functional standard has come out around digital and data projects that came out in this month. So you can find that on the website. I might have a link in here too, actually. So knowing that there are standards is one thing. Using the ones that will work for not only your project, type of project it is. You've got Agile, Waterfall. You've got digital projects, you've got various project styles that you can approach, but it's knowing the best practices there, but what's going to work for your culture and for your project. So it's not following the book, but it's using the skills that you need and the parts of the standard that will work for your environment. There isn't one size that fits all. Lack of access to previous lessons learned or team members. It's very, very hard to get a accurate and solid view of lessons learned. They come in different standards, they come in different formats, they are incomplete, or where they are complete, it's context specific. So it's hard to realize the benefits of it to your new project. So it's a difficult one to crack, that one. Weak ongoing management, inadequately trained or inexperienced project managers, obviously. Very difficult, and it's not easy to get the resources you need when you need them. So you've got the right project manager for this particular project, but they're not available right now, so timing plays its part. Inadequate tracking and reporting. Reports come in many and varied flavors, but they don't always have the key information in the report. Lots of pretty colors, lots of tables, lots of words, but is it telling you something that you need to know that can help you make that project or that delivery a success? So don't always take the reporting that you're given. Ask what questions is it answering for you. Ineffective time and cost management, clear problem for project failure. Lack of leadership and or communication skills, another easy one. Now, I like this. This is, so Merv is he's a big keynote talks that he gives, and he is a big supporter of the importance and the realization of benefits management. All the way through your projects, he's a really he's done some really good articles and supports it big time. Now he gives a presentation called The Broken Promise or Real Deal, and is talking specifically around government transformation. Now he's got the image of the book up here, and again, that's a good book if you get the opportunity to read Richard's book. It does go back through a number of government projects over the years and how they've not necessarily gone the way they should and how complex they are. But this list of bullets down here, if you read them, it really does paint a picture of what it's like to deliver some of these projects and programs, especially when you're in a transformation space where you're changing lots of different aspects all at the same time. So if you don't know what you want, or what you want keeps changing, or you can't commit the required money to the project, I mean, just the top 3 really paints a picture of it. But all of these bullets, I think you can relate to in one way or another for very large-scale projects that have gone wrong. You can read those later. So the IPA. So we've talked about a number of different causes there that could be causes. What are the reasons for project failure? The IPA, so this was a Crossing the Valley of Death article, and it talks through, it's from the IPA, and it talks through some of the reasons, what is it that's causing project failure. So I've summarized in the bullets. Lack of clarity around project objectives. We've already talked about that, but that's something that's coming from the IPA, their view of what causes project failure. A lack of alignment amongst stakeholders, we just talked to that. Unclear governance and accountability, so that helps with the timing and the assessment, making sure it is what it should be. Insufficient resources, human or financial, inexperienced project leadership, and over-ambitious cost and schedule. And this is the IPA, so they look after the major projects and portfolio for government, and these are the key bullets that they are pulling out. Gives you a good feel for it. IPA, what do they say? What is the fix? So they suggest a well-designed projects address all these issues and more, and they focus on the project initiation phase. And that point of the project is crucial. So they take the time at the beginning, make sure the objectives are nailed down, everybody's aware, stakeholders are aligned, just as we just talked about, accountabilities are well defined, especially when you've got external or commercial parties involved, and everybody's clear on what those are, all the objectives and the accountabilities. So they're very much pushing that project initiation at that phase is critical to avoid failures in projects. That's the IPA giving that advice. The problem with this fix is that good project initiation takes time. And when you've got your business case coming together, you've got, someone's giving you the nod for the money, everyone's rushing around. I don't see always really good time being given to project initiation. Everyone's in a hurry. They want to start delivering. So, some other fixes. Great leadership is not the work of a single person, but the building and orchestrating of the whole project system. So this again comes from the Oxford Group, and what they are advocating is that it's not a particular phase of the project, it's not a particular skill set, it's not a particular style of project delivery or best practice or methodology. What they're talking about is the programmatics. So it's how do you orchestrate all the parts of the project to work together. They talk here, we found that programmatics, key activities programmed into rigorous structures and processes, are the way project master builders build their systems for success. So it is really building the project itself rather than what the project is building, orchestrating all the innards of the project to work appropriately together. That's what they're talking about here. PMI, so this is another institute talking about what are the drivers. Their drivers, we'll talk through these. First one, invest in executive sponsors. So they're talking at the top of the tree, support for a project is priceless Actively engaged executive sponsors help organizations bridge the communications gap. That's, as I mentioned earlier, in that having a very strong sponsor who's very well connected can really move mountains for projects and make things a lot easier, or when it gets tough, make things move a little bit faster, which is worth its weight in gold. Analysis shows that the dominant driver of projects meeting their original goals is an actively engaged sponsor. Now, I know I can talk to that from experience. I'm sure a number of you have very similar experiences. Having someone at the top who's really bought in can drive things forward. Number 2, control scope and scope creep. This comes from PMI's Pulse of the Profession. Again, uncontrolled expansion of project scope, obviously going to cause problems. So managing that scope and having a strong sponsor. And mature value delivery capabilities. Now, value delivery capabilities can be a bit vague. Now, this means exactly the same as the programmatics piece from the Oxford Group. So they are talking about the capabilities to deliver the project's engine, the innards of the project working together. So spending time getting that right pays dividends. That came from PMI. This is just summarizing those 3. So investing in your sponsors at the top, controlling that scope, and then growing the delivery capabilities, that orchestrating, getting the right project structure, program management in place to make it a success. So my personal conclusions from being in projects that have failed, projects that have nearly failed, projects that have been successful, you don't learn so much from, but I've had my share of those as well. My conclusions are, if you go into a project, assume your estimates will be wrong and they will take too long to get. So if you're building an outline business case, you need to come up with some numbers. To come up with some numbers, you need to ask stakeholders. There will be experts that you need to get in touch. You might need suppliers. It will take you longer than you think to get everything lined up to get the numbers you need, or you will go with estimates that are not as accurate or high quality as you could have. So be wary of that. Your leadership will be distracted. In some cases, there will be saboteurs, not deliberately, but they might not be helping you simply because they're wearing other hats or this is not their priority yet. So need to make sure you've got your eye on the leadership. Suppliers will be engaged too late. It can take longer to get commercials set up, contracts through, legal reviews, etc., etc. So be prepared for that. You will tell the experts what they need to do. And this is often a control issue for a number of organizations. The organization knows it best because it's their organization. So recognize that when it's happening, that you might be trying to tell the experts what the solution is. That happens. So listen to the experts, understand what they say before you apply your judgments, and try and keep that gap between action and reaction. It will take twice as long to do things. So at least if you factor that in, you've got a better chance of avoiding failures. And on any projects that require a security input or there is data involved, be prepared that you may run into some very interesting roadblocks, especially where there's legacy systems, historical data, the advent of things like GDPR and how data can be stored, used, and processed. That might surface some landmines that you weren't aware existed. So that's from my own experience. The practical fixes for me, taking the time up front and on your estimating and the scope. So getting suppliers involved in your estimates, get their view, get the numbers right, take that time up front. It's much better to have higher quality scientific or evidence-based estimates where you can to support it. It will help you in the long run. Where possible, always lead with a discovery. Do that bit of research up front, understand what the problem statement is, and put some time into analyzing it. Don't just take it for read, that the first cut is the right answer. You don't know what you don't know, and it's early in the program, so information will emerge. That time in discovery is very, very helpful. And compensate for biases. Know that you've got biases and try and make sure you're factoring those out. Costs and schedule biases. Whatever you're doing, if you can break it up into smaller chunks, it's easier to manage. It's easier for people to get their heads around. It just aids the planning, and you've got clear, defined phases to work through. It's much easier when the goal is closer and you can keep the energy in the project driving along towards it. Loyalty and leadership. Loyalty, and you will find increasingly in project management now, behaviors are a big part of how projects can succeed and what cause failure. So loyalty is an interesting word, but it's to the vision, it's to the project and the business and the team. And it's really keeping that trust, engagement, energy, respect. These are the behaviors piece. So loyalty is probably a broad word here, but it's having that in place to make sure that people are working together. Common language. If you're in IT or lots of other sectors, IT specifically is very jargon heavy. The technologies, just the processes, the steps, there's lots of jargon everywhere. So having a common language is important, and that might be that you're all using jargon and no one outside can understand, but we do tend to push more for common language and transparency. So be aware that having that transparent communication will really help. And stability in teams. Now, it's very easy to sort of change people around in this day and age. Flexible resources, more and more contracts are somewhat limited and easier to change. Having a stable team, reducing the churn really helps. Having a stable structure and not changing it every phase or every hurdle that comes, we'll just rejig things around. That consistency, it sounds a bit like the slow tortoise getting there, but that consistency really helps. That and consistent leadership makes a huge difference. Being able to have a senior who can stick around all the way through and not move off will really carry you through.